Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for allowing me to rise to speak in the House on this bill, Bill S-5, the Financial System Review Act, which we are considering today here at third reading. And I'd like to thank the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary and the Minister of Health for his comments, especially those on financial literacy, because I think they are a cornerstone of understanding for all Canadians to be able to understand their institutions. And this is something that will help the jobs and economy of this country continue to grow. This act is a significant piece of legislation because although this is purely technical, it will guarantee the long-standing strength and security of Canada's financial institutions. And our government will make a series of changes to the various pieces of legislation which govern Canada's financial system, including the Canadian Payments Act, about which I will speak in greater detail in just a few moments. Excuse me. However, first of all, I want to emphasize to members of this House and Canadians watching at home that the Financial System Review Act is a mandatory and routine legislation. Canada's financial system is the safest and most secure in the world, and that's a direct result of mandatory 5-year reviews. That kind of vigilance has been absolutely critical to maintaining our economic strength in our financial institutions. And as the honourable member before me pointed out, much of the world has lauded that, understands that, and has given credit for it. And thanks to the greatest finance minister on the planet, the honourable okay. No, absolutely not. That's why we have the system that we have. In fact, it is long-standing tradition in Canada to conduct mandatory 5-year reviews of Canada's financial sector legislation. And I should point out that this most recent review process was officially launched in September of 2010 when our Conservative government launched a public consultation process open to all Canadians. I'm sure that most members of this House are familiar with the World Economic Forum has ranked Canada as having the soundest banks in the world for 4 years running. What's more, Canada's safe and secure financial system is the envy of the world. Mr. Speaker, I quote from the United States Congressional Research Services report, which explains how Canadian banks offer a model to the United States and other countries on how to avoid a future financial market crisis. I quote, Canada's financial system in particular garnered attention because it seemed to be more resistant to the failures and bailouts that have marked banks in the United States and Europe. Unquote. As my honourable colleagues are no doubt aware, Canada's credit unions offer important and valuable services as part of our banking sector. Indeed, more than 5 million Canadians, Indeed, more than 5 million Canadians and business owners are the grassroots shareholders of cooperative financial services in Canada, and 1 in 3 Canadians is a member of a credit union or Caisse Populaire. In recent years, our Conservative government has demonstrated its commitment to credit unions by supporting a federal credit union charter to accommodate growth and expansion of the Canadian credit union system. These actions will ensure that those credit unions which choose to pursue business ventures out of the province will not be constrained by outdated rules of provincial incorporation. Furthermore, they will also give credit unions a means of diversifying sources of funding and spreading their geographic risk exposure. Similarly, in order to provide federal credit unions with a greater leverage at the Canadian Payments Association, today's legislation will amend the Canadian Payments Act so that credit unions are classified under the cooperatives class in the Act instead of the bank class. At the same time, credit unions will still employ the long-standing, well-understood, and robust governance, liquidity, and clearing and settlement frameworks in use today. While this may sound like nothing more than a technical change, it is nevertheless fundamentally important, Mr. Speaker. This change will continue to promote a level playing field within the financial sector, which fosters competition amongst players and ensures a stronger, more stable overall system. Indeed, here's what the Credit Union Central of Canada, the National Association for Credit Unions in Canada, had to say about this particular modification, and it's a rather lengthy quote. Quote, we want to note our support for the proposed amendments. Placing the federal credit union in the cooperatives class will preserve and strengthen the credit union system representation at the CPA. It will ensure that a federal credit union will be represented by a director who speaks for the interests of cooperative financial institutions in CPA matters. A strong advocate of the CPA is important for credit union system's ability to advocate on behalf of credit unions and to continue to operate payments facility efficiently and cost effectively, which has a direct impact on overall credit union systems competitive. That's unquote. And that CPA, just to remind everybody, is Canadian Payments Act. Mr. Speaker, I am certain that all members of this House would be in agreement that a stronger credit union system can benefit all Canadians. Finally, as I mentioned at the outset of my remarks, I would like to speak to a piece of the Financial System Review Act that makes improvements to Canada's payment system, something Canadians deal with almost each and every day. Indeed, every year, Canadians make 24 billion payments worth more than $44 trillion. These payments allow us to run our businesses, sustain our households, and allow governments to fund essential programs. Canadians use various payments instruments to purchase goods and services, to make financial investments, and to transfer funds from one person to another. These instruments include cash, checks, debit, and credit cards. With the exception of cash, payment instruments have typically necessitated a claim on a financial institution, such as a bank, credit union, or Caisse Populaire. Therefore, banks and credit unions must make arrangements to transfer funds amongst themselves, either on their own or on their customers' behalf. A payment system is set on instruments, procedures, and rules used to transfer these funds. In Canada, our national systems for clearing and settlement of payments are run by the Canadian Payments Association, or the CPA, a not-for-profit organization of federally regulated financial institutions. Our government knows that no modern economy can reliably function without a payment system that is sophisticated and secure. However, the payments landscape is changing, Mr. Speaker. For example, experience in Canada and abroad since the 1990s demonstrates that clearing and settlement systems do not always include banks as direct participants. That's why this bill, Bill S-5, seeks to amend the Payment and Clearing and Settlement Act to remove the requirement that there must be at least one bank involved in a payments transaction. These new rules will allow more flexibility in establishing systems to clear complex financial instruments like over-the-counter derivatives or OTCs. This adjustment will permit the Bank of Canada to monitor payments that could pose systemic risk to the financial system. Mr. Speaker, Canada's leadership in reforming the global financial system through membership in international organizations, such as the G20, is well known and a source of pride for Canadians. What Canadians may not know is that one important commitment we have made to our G20 partners that all our OTCs will be cleared through central counterparties by 2012. This is an important step for the resilience and stability of our financial system. To meet our G20 commitments, it is critical that Canadian prudential and market conduct regulators have the necessary authority, tools, and information to regulate the Canadian OTC derivatives market on an ongoing basis. This means coordinating activities across current federal and provincial jurisdictions, as well as with foreign regulators. Mr. Speaker, this is the kind of evolutionary change that demonstrates the importance of regular reviews in our legislative framework to maintain Canada's leadership in financial services. For these reasons, Mr. Speaker, I urge the members to support passage of this largely technical but immensely important act, which will help to ensure the continued functioning of Canada's payments system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the member's intervention on this bill. I'd like to ask him, we've raised this issue before in debate on this bill, S-5, and the matter came up recently this week in the media, where the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investment, it's a voluntary organized dispute resolution organization that was set up back in 2002, I believe. Two of the big major banks withdrew from that organization, are no longer participating in it. And the Ombudsman himself has said that that has effectively made the organization almost useless. I'd like to ask the member if he would explain what it is that his government is going to do to make sure that there is the kind of independent analysis, dispute resolution for these matters that was normally provided by this organization.
For Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question. I didn't hear that direct comment in the media at the time, but, Mr. Speaker, nothing here is invalidated, so I reject the premise of his question. There are independent bodies, as I indicated in my speech, that do provide this advice. We have, of course, in this act, in this legislation, consulted widely with Canadians as well as to what they want, including all the credit unions and caisse populaires. And those independent factors, those independent experts in the industry are available to us to refer to and to provide comment on this at any time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hope I don't waste all my good lines that I'll be using when I get up next in asking questions. But I would like to follow up further on the point that I made about the Ombudsman's organization that I was referring to, the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investments. Was an article that appeared in the Globe and Mail the 27th of March, where and I just want to say to the member that the organization was set up to provide independent complaint handling, dispute resolution on behalf of customers, clients of the banks, to deal with it in a manner that was independent, and it's been clearly stated that in fact the organization's effectiveness has been lost because two of the big banks are no longer participating, and I think that it's a problem when customers, consumers don't have the opportunity to receive an unbiased, independent review of their particular complaints. And the Minister and the Parliamentary Secretary have said on this point that, well, we're going to do something about it, but nothing has come forward. So I wondered if the member would please comment on why he does not think that an independent arbiter representing customers and consumers is not a good idea.
The honourable member for Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nobody has said that independence is not a good idea in the financial field. It is there. The Ombudsman remains in his position, and it's essentially the same question that the member asked me just a moment ago, and the answer remains the same. There is independence in this structure. Consumers still have a right to redress and recourse, and that will be provided throughout the process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.